He wasn't supposed to survive. One push was all it took to send the chair past the edge, past the gravel, past the last thin line between a quiet mountain trail and the dark drop below, and for one terrible second the world seemed to forget how to breathe. The evening sky over western Montana had gone the color of cold steel, and a hard wind moved through the pines with the dry whisper of something ancient and merciless. Ethan Walker felt the back wheels lose ground before his mind could catch up. Then came the scrape of metal against stone, the sharp jolt in his ribs, the sickening tilt of open air, and the sound that followed him into the fall was not his own voice, but Rex's. The German shepherd barked once, deep and raw, a sound that cut through the canyon like a warning sent too late for men, but not, perhaps, for God. Ethan did not remember hitting bottom, because there was no bottom, only a violent stop halfway down where the wheelchair caught between two jagged outcroppings and hung there at an angle no body was made to trust. His breath left him in a thin, broken gasp. Dust drifted upward. Pebbles skipped into the ravine below and vanished without an answer. For a long moment he could only stare at the fading sky through the branches above, stunned by the simple fact that he was still alive. His right hand trembled against the cold armrest. His left shoulder burned with a deep, electric ache. Somewhere above him, maybe 30 feet, maybe more, the trail waited in silence. He tried to call out, but his voice came back small and rough, swallowed by stone and wind. Vanessa. Her name barely made it past his lips. No answer. Just the low cry of the pines and the far-off roll of evening thunder over the mountains. He closed his eyes for 1 second, maybe 2, and in that darkness the truth came back to him with awful clarity. Her hands on the push handles, the pause behind him, the flatness in her voice when she said, "I'm sorry, Ethan. I can't do this anymore." Not grief. Not panic. Something colder. Something already decided. When he opened his eyes again, the world looked different. Not because the mountain had changed, but because trust had. A shape moved high. Above the cliff line. Fast. Lean. Familiar. Rex. The dog's dark coat flashed between the rocks as he ran along the ridge, ears pinned, body low, searching. Not barking wildly. Not wasting motion. Looking. Calculating. Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Rex," he whispered, and this time the name carried something stronger than pain. The German shepherd appeared at the lip of the slope, amber eyes fixed on him with a terrible, human kind of knowing. The dog gave a sharp bark, then vanished again, racing to the right where the terrain dipped and twisted through scrub pine and broken stone. Ethan wanted to tell him not to go. Wanted to beg him to stay where he could still be seen. But another part of him, the part that had worn a uniform and trusted instinct over panic, understood exactly what Rex was doing. The dog was not leaving. He was choosing the only path that might save them both. The wind sharpened. Dusk gathered in the ravine like water filling a grave. Ethan's legs, useless and still beneath the blanket over his lap, offered no help now, but the rest of him had not given up yet. He shifted an inch, then stopped as the chair groaned against the rock. Bad move. One more careless breath, and the whole thing might slide. So he held still. Above him, the first drops of rain began to fall, cool against his forehead, light at first, then slower and heavier, carrying the smell of wet earth, pine sap, and the coming night. Ethan lifted his eyes toward the rim where Rex had disappeared, and for the first time since the chair went over, hope arrived not as comfort, but as duty. Thin. Fierce. Breathing. Somewhere in the darkening mountain, a loyal dog was running for help. Ethan counted his breaths because it was the only thing he could still control. In through the nose, slow and shallow. Out through clenched teeth. The old discipline came back in pieces, not like courage, but like muscle memory from another life, a life where panic got men killed and silence sometimes kept them alive. Rain tapped softly against the metal frame of the chair, then harder, until the whole ravine seemed to hum with it. Water ran down the rock face in silver threads and darkened the denim over his knees. The cold settled in fast. At this elevation, slipping beneath his jacket, finding the places already weakened by pain and shock. He lifted one hand from the armrest and touched the side of the chair, testing the balance. It answered with a low creak that froze him still. No more movement. Not unless he wanted to trust 600 pounds of steel, rock, and gravity to mercy. Above him, thunder moved closer. The pines swayed and whispered. Somewhere farther down the mountain, a creek answered with a faint rush over stone. It smelled of wet bark, mud, and ozone, sharp enough to taste. Ethan swallowed and tried again to call out, but the effort scraped his throat raw. Nobody would hear him from here. Nobody except the dog who already had. That thought stayed with him. It burned low and steady inside his chest while the light drained from the sky. He had seen Rex do impossible things before. During training, the dog had once found a missing hiker in sleet after every radio call had gone dead. Another time, back when Ethan still believed his body would always obey him, Rex had refused to move past a culvert on a back road outside Pendleton until a blown tire and a hidden washout proved the dog right. Rex was never allowed for attention. He was quiet for a reason. The memory steadied him now. Then, as if called up by faith alone, a sound reached him through the rain. Not close. Not yet. One bark. Then another, farther off, moving through the trees. Ethan tilted his head and listened with everything he had left. Rex was not circling blindly. He was going somewhere. Good boy, Ethan thought, though no sound came out this time. The words stayed behind his teeth, warm and helpless. Minutes passed strangely after that. Time and pain had a way of stretching and folding in on itself. Sometimes he was in the ravine, watching mist gather in the branches. Sometimes he was somewhere else entirely, hearing rotor blades, sand against canvas, the clipped voice of a corpseman telling him to stay awake. Then the mountain returned, hard and wet and darkening by the second. He blinked rain from his eyes and saw, just for an instant, movement above the trail. Not Vanessa. Too broad. Too quick. A man, maybe, stepping through the timber with a flashlight cutting pale slices through the rain. Ethan held his breath. The beam vanished. Then came Rex's bark again, urgent now, closer, followed by the unmistakable crash of someone forcing his way downhill. Ethan felt his heart strike once, hard enough to hurt. He had been many things in his life. Marine. Husband. Patient. Burden, if Vanessa had truly meant what she said. But in that moment he was something simpler than all of them. He was a man in the dark, cold and hurting, waiting on the sound of another soul coming back for him. He turned his face upward as rain slid down his temples and into his collar. Here, he rasped, louder than before, though it still came out broken. Down here. For one terrible second, there was nothing but weather. Then a voice answered from somewhere above, rough with distance and disbelief. Ethan? It was Sam Whitaker. Neighbor. Former smoke jumper. One of the few men in town who still looked Ethan in the eye without pity. Relief hit so suddenly it almost felt like grief. Ethan closed his eyes, let his head fall back against the rain-cold frame, and listened as Rex barked again beside the approaching footsteps, as if he had reached the one man in the whole mountain who would understand that some calls for help do not come in words. Sam Whitaker did not waste words. Ethan heard him before he saw him clearly, boots slipping against wet shale, breath steady in the rain, one hand parting low branches while the flashlight in the other searched the ravine with narrow, disciplined sweeps. Rex moved around him like a dark current, never frantic, always returning to the same spot above Ethan as if to say here, not 1 yard lower. Then the beam found the trapped chair and Sam stopped so suddenly the light shook. Lord have mercy, he breathed, not loud, not theatrical, just honest in the way men speak when they have run out of useful things to say. Ethan lifted his chin a fraction. Water rolled down his face. Took you long enough, he whispered, trying for humor and missing by a mile. But Sam understood anyway. He crouched near the edge, rain collecting on the shoulders of his canvas jacket, gray in his beard, jaw tight with the kind of focus that leaves no room for fear until later. Do not move, he said. Not an inch. I mean it. Ethan almost laughed at that. The chair groaned again beneath him, answering for both of them. Sam lowered the flashlight, studying the angle, the rocks, the narrow shelf where the back wheel had jammed. He had spent 20 years dropping into wildfires, carrying half-conscious men through timber and smoke, reading terrain the way other men read weather reports. He saw the truth at once. One bad shift and Ethan would not fall far, but far enough. Rex whined low in his throat, paws planted, reins slicking his sable coat flat against the hard lines of muscle and bone. Sam reached out and gripped the dog's neck for one brief second. "Good dog," he said. "You did right." Rex did not soften. He kept his eyes on Ethan. Sam pulled his phone from his jacket and turned slightly to shield it from the rain. No signal. He tried again, moving 2 steps upslope, then 3. Nothing. The storm had swallowed the mountain whole. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We do this old school." He dropped his pack to the ground and unzipped it with fast, practiced hands. Ethan heard the familiar sounds of clipped metal, coiled rope, nylon webbing, the dry rasp of equipment that had lived through weather and work. Sam always kept rescue gear in his truck. In Montana, a man did not need a profession to know that mountains took what they wanted. He set an anchor around the trunk of a ponderosa pine, checked it twice, then lay flat on the wet ground and leaned over the edge until the rain dripped from his brow onto Ethan's jacket. "Look at me," he said. Ethan did. "You with me?" "Still here." "Any head injury?" Ethan thought about the flash of white when the chair struck rock, the ringing in his ears, the heaviness behind his eyes. "Maybe a little." Sam nodded once, filing it away. "Can you feel your hands?" "Yes." "Legs?" Ethan let the question hang in the rain between them. Sam shut his eyes for half a heartbeat, regretting it the moment it left his mouth. "Right. Sorry." Ethan tried to shrug, but pain caught him halfway. "Not exactly a new problem." Sam gave the faintest breath of a laugh, more exhale than sound. It was enough. Enough to remind them both that Ethan was not gone yet. Sam threaded a rescue line through his harness and began lowering himself down the slope inch by careful inch, boots finding holds in the rock, gloved hands controlling the descent. Above them, lightning flickered soundlessly behind the clouds, turning the whole ravine silver for an instant. In that pale light, Ethan saw Rex lying flat at the rim, chest to the mud, eyes unblinking, as if the dog had appointed himself guardian of the narrow space between life and whatever waited below. Sam reached the side of the chair and braced one shoulder against the rock wall. Close up, his face looked older than Ethan remembered, lined by weather and years of carrying other people out of bad places. "I have got you now," he said quietly. No promises bigger than that. No false courage. Just a hand on the frame, a rope drawn tight, and one man choosing not to leave another alone in the storm. Sam moved with the caution of a man who respected gravity more than pride. Rain streamed off the brim of his cap and darkened the rope in his hands, but his grip never slipped. He wedged one boot against a narrow ledge, pressed his shoulder harder into the rock beside the chair, and listened to the mountain the way some men listen to a confession. Every small sound mattered now. The tick of pebbles shifting. The groan of wet metal under strain. Ethan's breathing, too quick when pain spiked, too shallow when the cold settled deeper into him. "I need you steady," Sam said. "No sudden movement. I am going to secure the frame first, then I am going to secure you." Ethan nodded once. It felt like lifting a cinder block. The rain had turned meaner, slanting sideways under the wind, and the canyon walls gathered the sound until it felt like the whole earth was whispering against them. Above, Rex remained at the rim for one long second, then disappeared again. Ethan's chest tightened. "Where's he going now?" Sam cinched a strap around the back of the chair and gave it a testing pull. "Probably doing what he has done all night," he said. "Making sure I do not die with you." It was a grim joke, but it landed softly. Ethan closed his eyes for a heartbeat and saw the dog as he had first been, all oversized paws and alert ears, standing in a training yard under California sun with a tennis ball at his feet and an expression that looked suspiciously like judgment. Rex had never belonged to anyone else after that. Some bonds did not begin with warmth. They began with recognition. Another line came down from above, thrown by Sam after he had looped the anchor twice around the pine. He worked by feel now as much as sight, hands practiced, movements small and exact. "I am going to clip you in under the arms," he said. "It will hurt." Ethan gave him the ghost of a smile. "Tonight already does." Sam leaned in carefully, the smell of rain, canvas, and cold iron coming off him, and threaded the rescue sling around Ethan's chest. The contact lit up pain across his ribs and shoulder so bright it nearly wiped the world white again. He sucked in a hard breath and held it there until the worst of it passed. Sam waited, not rushing him. "Stay with me," he said quietly. "Do not go drifting off because it feels easier." Ethan opened his eyes and fixed them on the dark line of the cliff above. "I am here." "Good." Sam tightened the buckle, checked it once, then once more. Above them, a bark rang out through the storm, closer this time, then another from farther back along the trail. Human voices followed, faint but real. Search and rescue. Sam had sent Rex, and Rex had found more help. The knowledge moved through Ethan like heat through frozen hands. A few minutes later, beams of white light cut across the rain from the ridge. Orders were called low and steady. Rope was fed. Carabiners clicked. The mountain that had seemed empty a short while ago now held men choosing to kneel in the mud for one wounded stranger because a dog would not stop asking them to. Sam looked up and shouted clear instructions, then turned back to Ethan. "When they tension the line, the chair may shift. You do not fight it. Let the harness carry you." Ethan swallowed and nodded. Sam braced himself. Above, the rope drew taut with a deep, living hum. The chair shuddered. Rock grated beneath one wheel. Ethan's stomach dropped so hard he thought for a moment they had lost it. Then the frame settled into the pull of the line instead of the pull of the abyss. 1 inch. Then another. Sam guided the angle with both hands, boots skidding, shoulder taking the scrape of stones so Ethan would not. Rain ran into Ethan's eyes, but through the blur he saw movement at the top again. Rex. Flat to the ground, paws dug into mud, staring down with the fierce stillness of a soldier holding his post. Ethan had once believed loyalty was proven in the big things, the uniform, the vows, the promises spoken out loud with witnesses nearby. But hanging there between stone and darkness, feeling the line lift him by degrees toward men who had come back for him, he understood something quieter and far more costly. Love was not always the hand that held the chair. Sometimes it was the one that ran through rain until somebody listened. The final pull to the top felt less like rescue and more like being borne through stone. The line tightened above Ethan's chest, and the chair rose another few inches, scraping, catching, then rising again as 3 men on the ridge leaned their weight backward in practiced rhythm. Sam kept one hand on the frame and the other near Ethan's shoulder, guiding him away from the rock face one careful degree at a time. Rainwater ran in cold streams off the cliff and down Ethan's neck, but the numbness that had haunted him earlier was giving way to something sharper now, a painful, undeniable awareness that he was moving towards solid ground. "That is it," Sam said. "Stay with us." The voices above came clearer through the storm. One man called measurements. Another adjusted tension on the line. Somebody else knelt at the rim and reached down as soon as Ethan's shoulders came level with the edge. Strong hands took hold of the rescue harness. Boots dug into mud. Then, all at once, the mountain gave him back. They eased him onto a tarp spread over wet earth, keeping his spine straight, cutting the harness free only after a medic in a yellow shell jacket gave the word. For a few seconds Ethan could do nothing but stare up into the rain, chest heaving, the sky above him dark and low and alive with moving clouds. Pine branches swayed overhead like black brushstrokes against bruised light. The air smelled of wet soil, diesel from the rescue truck farther down the trail, and the sharp medicinal scent of a trauma kit being torn open nearby. "Pupils are equal," the medic said, shining a light into Ethan's eyes. "Pulses fast but strong. We need to get him warm." A foil blanket crackled as they spread it over him, trapping what little heat his body still held. The sound was strange and almost tender in that weather, like paper around a gift no one expected to receive twice. Then came the soft rush of paws over mud. "Rex." He appeared at Ethan's side with his coat soaked through, flanks working, amber eyes locked on him with such fierce attention it nearly undid him. The dog pressed his muzzle against Ethan's hand first, then against his chest, inhaling as if checking that life was still there. Ethan's fingers trembled as they found the fur between Rex's ears. Warm. Wet. Real. You did it, he whispered, his voice barely more than rain. Rex let out a low sound deep in his throat, not quite a whine, not quite a sigh, and lowered himself beside the tarp as if guarding a perimeter only he could see. The medic glanced at Sam. This dog found you? Sam wiped rain from his face with the back of one glove and nodded. Found me, led me, then went back for your crew when I had no signal. Smarter than half the county. One of the younger rescue men gave a breathless laugh, but no one disagreed. They had all seen enough tonight to know the line between instinct and miracle was thinner than people like to think. A backboard was brought in, then the careful, measured transfer from tarp to stretcher. Ethan gritted his teeth through the movement and kept his gaze on Rex. Not the lights. Not the equipment. Not the swirling edge of memory that kept trying to drag him elsewhere. Just the dog. Just those steady eyes that had followed him through deployments, surgeries, and long afternoons when even the house had felt too quiet to bear. As they secured the straps, another figure emerged at the edge of the lantern glow near the trailhead. Slim. Pale. Motionless under a hooded raincoat. Vanessa. She stood with both arms wrapped around herself, her face arranged in something that might have passed for concern in weaker light. But Rex saw her before Ethan did. The dog was on his feet in an instant, body rigid, head low, a warning rumbling through his chest so deep it sounded older than anger. The entire rescue team turned. Vanessa took one step forward, then stopped. Ethan, she said, and even from 20 feet away her voice felt wrong, too soft, too polished, like a hand laid over broken glass. Ethan looked at her for a long second without speaking. Rain struck the hood over her hair. Water streamed from the hem of her coat. She looked like any worried wife waiting in a storm, and yet the mountain itself seemed to know better. So did the dog. Rex did not bark wildly. He simply stood between them, soaked and shaking and immovable, as if the last clean thing left in the world had decided, without words, that Ethan Walker would not be left alone with her again. The ride down the mountain blurred into fragments of light and sound. Red and amber strobes washed across rain-soaked trees, then vanished behind the rear windows of the rescue truck as it crawled over the switchbacks toward town. Ethan lay strapped to the stretcher, wrapped in blankets that trapped more noise than warmth, while each rut in the road sent a quiet ache through his ribs and shoulder. Above him, the interior lights hummed softly. A paramedic checked his pulse, asked simple questions, wrote down answers with the calm efficiency of someone who had learned long ago that fear spreads faster when fed. Ethan gave his name, the date, the county, the mountain trail. He did not say Vanessa's name again. He did not need to. It lingered in the truck anyway, thin and cold as the smell of antiseptic. Rex rode behind the front seats, soaked to the skin, refusing every attempt to coax him farther away. He sat rigid on the rubber floor, paws braced, amber eyes fixed on Ethan so completely that the medic finally stopped trying to move him. He is calmer when the dog is close, she said, adjusting the blood pressure cuff around Ethan's arm. Sam, riding up front with one hand on the dash, looked back through the partition and answered in the rough, matter-of-fact tone he used for weather and funerals. The dog is calmer when Ethan is breathing. I would not separate them tonight. Nobody argued after that. By the time they reached St. Helena Regional, the storm had thinned to a cold mist drifting under the parking lot lights. The hospital doors opened with a rush of sterile air and yellow light, and for a moment the warmth felt almost unreal, like stepping into somebody else's life. Nurses met them with quick hands and clipped questions. Wheels rattled over tile. Fluorescent light replaced lightning. Ethan watched ceiling panels pass above him in a steady white rhythm while voices rose and fell around the stretcher. X-rays. Observation. Possible concussion. Shoulder trauma. Mild hypothermia. Through it all, Rex stayed near enough that Ethan could hear the soft click of nails on polished floor whenever the dog shifted his weight. It was only when they reached the treatment bay that a nurse in blue scrubs looked down, noticed the German shepherd at the threshold, and hesitated. "Sir, I am sorry, but animals are not usually allowed back here." Ethan turned his head toward her, slow and exhausted. Before he could speak, Rex gave one low sound from his chest and stood more squarely between the gurney and the curtain opening, not threatening, just certain. Then Sam stepped forward, reins still drying in dark patches across his shirt, and said, "That dog is the reason he is alive. You can call administration later. Tonight he stays." Something in his voice made the room still. The nurse looked from Sam to Ethan, then to Rex, who had not taken his eyes off the bed. After a beat, she nodded once. "5 minutes, she said softly, as if making an exception for more than hospital policy. Ethan lifted a trembling hand over the side rail, and Rex came close enough to rest his muzzle in it. The gesture was small. Almost nothing. But it held the weight of the whole mountain. A doctor with silver hair and kind eyes began examining Ethan, shining a penlight, testing reflexes, pressing gently along the bruised places. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked. Ethan stared at the ceiling for a long second. The answer existed in him now with the sharpness of broken ice. The trail. The pause. Vanessa's hands. The sentence she had spoken in that empty, exhausted voice. Yet memory had a strange mercy at the edges of shock. It let a man hold the facts without quite feeling them all at once. "I went over the side," Ethan said quietly. The doctor waited. "Accident." The room seemed to narrow around that one word. Rex lifted his head. Sam, standing near the curtain, said nothing. Ethan turned his face slightly and saw Vanessa through the glass panel in the hall, one hand pressed dramatically over her mouth, the other gripping her purse strap. She looked fragile, concerned, almost convincing. Then Rex saw her too. A deep rumble rolled through the dog again, steady as distant thunder, and Ethan understood with sudden, terrible clarity that the one creature in this room without language was also the one least capable of lying. He looked back at the doctor. His throat felt dry as ash. "No," he said at last. "It was not an accident." The words did not echo when Ethan spoke them. They simply settled into the room and changed its temperature. The doctor lowered his penlight. The nurse at the curtains stopped writing for half a second. Beyond the glass panel in the hallway, Vanessa's expression held, but only barely, like lacquer over cracked wood. She opened the door with a careful push and stepped inside, carrying a look of wounded concern that might have persuaded strangers on another night. Her blonde hair was damp at the temples from the storm. Her cream sweater hung loose beneath a rain-dark coat, soft and expensive and chosen, Ethan thought suddenly, for exactly this kind of performance. "Ethan," she said, voice thin with practiced emotion, "you are confused. You hit your head. Please do not do this." Rex rose at once from beside the bed. Not lunging. Not chaotic. He simply stood between the gurney and Vanessa with the full length of his body aligned like a line no one should cross. A low warning rolled through his chest, steady and restrained, ancient as weather. Vanessa froze. For a flicker of a second, something cold passed through her eyes, not fear exactly, but irritation, the kind a person feels when a locked door appears where they expected a hallway. Sam saw it too. Ethan could tell by the way his jaw hardened near the curtain. The doctor straightened, every trace of softness gone from his tone. "Ma'am, I need you to wait outside. I am his wife. And he has just stated this was not an accident." The room grew very quiet after that. Hospital quiet was different. From mountain quiet. Cleaner. Brighter. More polite. But underneath it lived the same thing, the human heart deciding whether it would tell the truth. Vanessa looked at Ethan as if willing him to retreat. He did not. Pain had stripped something out of him on that mountainside, but it had left one useful thing behind. Clarity. He remembered the trail now in hard, separate pieces. The overlook above Widow's Pass. The sky going gray. Vanessa insisting they take the scenic route even though the weather was turning. The way she had fastened his blanket over his legs with unusual care. The pause behind him. Then that sentence, spoken so softly he had almost mistaken it for sorrow. I cannot do this anymore. Not marriage. Not devotion. Not the long work of staying. She had not shouted. She had not trembled. That was what made it worse. Evil, Ethan thought, did not always arrive with a wild face. Sometimes it came in a tired voice and clean shoes. A deputy arrived within 20 minutes, then another. Questions began quietly at first. Time of the fall. Position of the chair. Who had been present? Sam gave his account in the same plain manner he used for everything. Rex had come to his porch alone, drenched and barking with a purpose he could not ignore. The overlook had no signal. The chair had been lodged in a place no man in Ethan's condition could have reached by himself. One deputy, younger than the rest, asked whether Ethan and Vanessa had been getting along. Ethan almost laughed at the smallness of the phrase. Getting along. As if betrayal were a matter of poor table manners. We were married, he said. That is not always the same thing. Later, when the deputies stepped out to speak with search and rescue, the room dimmed into the blue hush of after-midnight hospital light. Rain ticked softly at the window. Machines near the bed gave off their patient little beeps, insisting on order where life had shown none. Rex returned to Ethan's side and laid his head across the blanket over his legs, careful of the bruised places, breathing slow now that the immediate danger had passed. Ethan rested his hand over the dog's neck and stared through the glass, where Vanessa sat alone in the corridor, her face turned away, one polished shoe tapping the tile in. A rhythm that betrayed more anger than grief. In that pale reflection, with fluorescent light washing all warmth from the world, Ethan understood something he had been too loyal to admit before. The fall had not begun at the cliff. It had begun months earlier, in all the small moments when love withdrew and calculation moved in to take its place. The mountain had simply made visible what the house had already been hiding. Morning came pale and thin, as if the sun itself was uncertain it belonged over a world like this. By then the storm had moved east, leaving the hospital windows washed clean and the parking lot silver with leftover rain. Ethan had not really slept. He had drifted in and out of a shallow, aching half-rest while nurses checked his vitals and machines kept their small faithful rhythm beside him. Each time he woke, Rex was there. Sometimes sitting upright near the bed like a watchman at post. Sometimes curled on the floor with his muzzle on his paws, one ear twitching at every footstep in the hall. He had not eaten much. Had barely touched the water bowl a sympathetic orderly set near the wall. It was as if the dog understood that rest was not yet safety, and safety was not yet truth. Around 8 o'clock, Detective Laura Bennett arrived with a legal pad, a plain navy blazer, and the kind of eyes that missed very little. She was in her early 40s, composed without being cold, and she spoke to Ethan in the steady tone of someone who believed facts could still be a form of mercy. She asked him to begin at the start of the day, not the fall. So he did. He told her about the breakfast Vanessa had made that morning, eggs he had barely touched, coffee poured before he asked, the unusual softness in her voice when she suggested a drive up to Widow's Pass to see the weather roll over the valley. He told her how Rex had paced near the mudroom door instead of jumping into the truck the way he usually did. How he had stared at Vanessa's hands while she folded the blanket over Ethan's legs. How she had laughed too brightly at small things, like a woman already rehearsing innocence. Detective Bennett did not interrupt. She only wrote, looked up, and asked for the details that matter in rooms where lives begin changing shape. Had there been financial strain? Insurance policies. Property in Ethan's name. Recent arguments. Ethan answered slowly, and with each answer the pattern beneath the marriage rose clearer from the fog. Vanessa had pushed for changes these last 6 months. Updates to beneficiary forms. Questions about the veteran disability payments. Pressure to sell a parcel of timberland that Ethan had inherited from his father. There had been no one dramatic fight, no single shattered plate, no scene a neighbor could point to and call proof. Just a long retreat of tenderness and a quiet advance of calculation. Detective Bennett listened to all of it, then closed the notebook for a moment and said, "We pulled the trail camera footage from the county access road." Ethan looked at her. "There is a camera up there?" "Not at the overlook, but on the lower gate." She paused. It shows your truck arriving. It does not show the fall. But it does show something else. Your wife leaving the trail alone on foot 23 minutes before search and rescue is called. The room grew still around those words. Even the hum of the heater seemed to drop back. Ethan stared at the blanket over his legs, at the place where Rex's head rested now, warm and heavy, and felt the truth settle deeper than anger. Vanessa had not run for help. She had walked away from the mountain and from him. Detective Bennett went on. A nurse's station camera had caught Vanessa in the hospital hallway on her phone before deputies arrived. She had deleted a voicemail moments later, but the carrier had preserved a partial backup. They were still working to recover the full audio. On top of that, the rescue team had photographed the wheelchair at the cliff edge before it was moved. The brake had been disengaged. The ground showed no signs of accidental slide. Sam's statement matched the physical evidence. So did Rex's behavior, though no court would write that part down the way it deserved. Ethan turned his face toward the window where the Montana morning lay clean and innocent over the hills, and for a second grief came to him not as tears, but as exhaustion. He had loved her once. That was the bitterest part. Not that evil had entered his life, but that it had. Entered wearing the face of someone he had trusted enough to let stand behind him. Rex lifted his head then and placed his muzzle gently on Ethan's forearm, the same way he used to do during bad nights after deployment, when memory made sleep feel unsafe. Ethan laid his hand over the dog's neck and closed his eyes. Detective Bennett watched them in silence before speaking again, more softly this time. We are going to bring her in for a formal interview. Ethan nodded, but the thing that steadied him was not the promise of procedure or law. It was the slow breathing of the dog beside him, the simple, faithful weight of a creature who had no interest in money, property, or escape. Only in staying. And sometimes, Ethan thought, staying was the clearest testimony God allows. Vanessa was arrested that afternoon. There was no dramatic scene in the hospital corridor, no raised voice, no final speech fit for a courtroom picture show. Just two deputies, a few quiet words, and the soft metallic sound of handcuffs closing around wrists that had once adjusted Ethan's blanket with the tenderness of a wife. She looked stunned, but not by what she had done. More by the fact that it had not worked. Ethan watched from his bed as they led her past the doorway. She did not look at him at first. Her eyes stayed fixed ahead, chin lifted, pride doing one last fragile job where love had long since resigned. But when she finally turned, just for a second, the expression on her face was not sorrow. It was disbelief that loyalty had outrun calculation. Rex stood before the bed without being told, broad chest still, ears high, saying nothing in the only language he had ever needed. That was the last time Ethan saw her outside a courtroom. The weeks that followed did not move like healing in the movies. They moved like real recovery, slow and repetitive and humbling. There were scans, statements, physical therapy appointments, insurance calls, interviews with detectives, follow-up visits for the shoulder, and the long fatigue that comes after the body survives what the heart still has not understood. Sam drove him home from the hospital 3 days later through valleys rinsed clean by autumn rain. The mountains stood blue in the distance, solemn and watchful. When they reached the house, Ethan hesitated. At the front porch ramp as if the place itself had become a witness. The wind chime by the eaves stirred with a small hollow music. Pine needles gathered in the corners of the deck. Everything looked the same. That was what made it hard. Evil rarely kicked the door in. More often it sat at the kitchen table and waited to be called by name. Sam carried in the overnight bag. Rex went room to room first, checking thresholds, sniffing corners, pausing at the back door, then returning to Ethan with the grave satisfaction of a soldier reporting a cleared perimeter. The simple faithfulness of it nearly broke him. That first night home, Ethan did not sleep in the master bedroom. He could not. Too many polished surfaces. Too much memory folded into the furniture. He asked Sam to help him settle into the smaller downstairs guest room with the view of the woods. Rex lay across the doorway until dawn, not possessive, not restless, simply present. And in the darkest hour, when the house creaked and old fear tried to return wearing the shape of falling, Ethan opened his eyes and saw the outline of the dog against the pale strip of moonlight under the hall lamp. He listened to that steady breathing and felt, for the first time since the mountain, that he had not been carried out of the ravine only to remain there in spirit. Months later, in a courtroom smelling faintly of paper, coffee, and floor polish, Ethan gave his testimony in a voice quieter than people expected. He did not embellish. Men who have known real danger rarely need to. Sam testified next, then Detective Bennett, then the rescue medic who had documented the condition of the chair and the angle of the slope. The recovered voicemail was played only in part. Vanessa's voice, cool and impatient, telling someone on the other end that by nightfall the problem would be over. There was a stillness in the room afterward that no one wanted to disturb. The verdict came before sunset. Guilty on every count the state had brought. Vanessa bowed her head, but no tears came. Some souls dry out long before judgment reaches them. Outside the courthouse the air held the first real bite of coming winter. Reporters lingered behind a line of tape. Veterans from the county had gathered on the steps without ceremony, caps in hand, saying little. Ethan rolled slowly into the light with Rex beside him, one hand resting on the dog's neck. Cameras flashed. Questions rose. He answered none of them. He had spent enough of his life surviving noise. What he wanted now was quieter than victory. It came a week later on a cold morning at home when the valley filled with silver fog and the sun began burning through it one patient layer at a time. Ethan sat on the porch in a heavy flannel jacket with a mug of coffee warming his hands. Rex lay at his feet, chin on his paws, amber eyes half closed in peace at last. No sirens. No deputies. No mountain trail. Just the smell of pine smoke from a neighbor's chimney, the distant call of a crow, and the kind of silence that no longer felt like threat. Ethan looked out at the trees, then down at the dog who had stayed when staying cost everything, and he understood that some stories do not end when justice is served. They end when the soul believes it is safe enough to rest. He set the mug down, reached into his pocket, and clipped a new brass tag onto Rex's collar. On one side it held the dog's name. On the other, just 4 quiet words. Never left me behind. In this deeply emotional journey, a wounded Marine in a wheelchair is betrayed at the edge of a Montana cliff, yet his loyal German shepherd refuses to leave his side. As the storm closes in and hope grows thin, the dog becomes the living thread between survival, truth, and grace. This is one of those unforgettable animal stories where courage does not roar, but stays. One of those rare animal stories where a service dog's loyalty becomes stronger than fear, and one of those powerful animal stories that blend heartbreak, rescue, justice, and quiet redemption into one cinematic experience. As the Marine fights through pain, the wife's deception slowly comes to light, while the German shepherd leads help through rain, stands guard in the hospital, and remains the one soul who never turns away. Viewers who love animal stories, military drama, loyal dog rescue narratives, emotional survival tales, and faith-filled storytelling will find a moving story of devotion, betrayal, healing, and mercy. With rich mountain atmosphere, suspenseful rescue moments, courtroom truth, and a final homecoming filled with peace, this is one of the most stirring animal stories for anyone who believes love can still be found in the darkest places, and that sometimes salvation arrives on 4 paws. Character 1. 38-year-old white U.S. Marine veteran in a wheelchair, rugged face, short dark hair touched with gray, light hazel eyes, olive military jacket, black beanie, front-facing portrait, realistic cinematic lighting, solemn expression. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Character 2. 6-year-old German shepherd, full-body standing pose, strong athletic build, deep sable coat with black saddle, alert ears, intelligent amber eyes, loyal protective presence, realistic fur texture, cinematic natural light, no cartoon. No CGI, no illustration.